You ever watch someone destroy something priceless and know deep in your gut that they're about to regret it, but you decide not to stop them? Not because you're cruel, but because you understand physics, the law, and human stupidity better than they do. That's the exact moment I knew the people trying to ruin me were about to ruin themselves, and the only thing I had to do was keep the receipts. 6 months earlier, if you'd told me I'd end up in a war with a neighborhood, bored over a stream, I'd have laughed. I thought my biggest life concern was deciding which of my 2 Labradors got the front seat in my truck. But that was before the Magnolia Hills Homeowners Association decided my backyard, my piece of heaven, was their property to redesign. I'm Noah Grant, 56 years old, and for the last 11 years, I've lived on 3 acres in the mountains of northern Georgia. My land came from my father, who built our cabin with his own hands in the early 70s. Back then, there wasn't a single gated community for miles. Just dirt roads, pine trees, and the sound of Wildcat Creek running past. Our back porch. That creek wasn't just decoration. It came with water rights recorded in 1891, older than the subdivision, older than paved roads in the county, older than the word HOA itself. For decades, that water was life. We fished in it, cooled our feet in the summer, and listened to its flow at night like our own lullaby. It had been the same for my dad until the day he passed. It was quiet, steady, untouchable, until the day Magnolia Hills arrived. They came in looking like something out of a luxury magazine. 60 homes, each worth close to $1 million, perfect lawns, imported stone driveways. At first, I didn't care. People have the right to live how they want. But then came her. Her name was Valerie Kane. Late 40s, president of the HOA, real estate broker by trade. The kind of person who could sell you your own car and convince you she was doing you a favor. She drove a black Range Rover, always had sunglasses on even when it was cloudy, and had that constant smile that felt more like a warning label than a kindness. She was new money with an old money attitude, and she hated anything she couldn't control. Our first interaction was a letter in my mailbox. It said I had unauthorized storage of mechanical equipment, visible from neighboring properties. Mechanical equipment? She meant my dad's old tractor and my workbench under the shed roof by the creek. The letter gave me 14 days to bring the property into compliance or face daily fines. I called her, politely explained that my land wasn't part of their subdivision and that the HOA rules didn't apply to me. I even emailed a copy of my deed showing my land's exemption. She didn't respond. Instead, a week later, the county zoning officer showed up, saying he'd received complaints that I was running an unlicensed repair business. He spent an hour walking my property and left shaking his head. There was nothing illegal, but I still had to pay my lawyer $900 to respond officially. That was Valerie's first move. The second came when she discovered the water rights. And in Georgia, those rights are power. If you control water flow, you control land values, insurance rates, even whether certain homes can get mortgages. She claimed my section of Wildcat Creek was creating erosion hazards downstream. Downstream meaning her neighborhood's private walking trail. Her lawyers filed a complaint to force me into a hydrology study that could have cost $35,000. The claim? My natural creek flow could cause flooding during heavy rains. Here's the problem for her. I'm a retired civil engineer. I've worked on water management projects from Alabama to West Virginia. The report she filed used 1970s county flood, maps that were outdated before half her subdivision existed. I called my old colleague from the Georgia Water Authority. He took one look at the real data and laughed. The truth? My creek section was the reason her neighborhood hadn't already flooded. My dad had built a series of stone spillways in the 70s that slowed runoff and absorbed peak flow. The county dismissed her complaint. That should have been the end. But Valerie didn't like losing. She called an emergency HOA meeting, conveniently on the week I was visiting my daughter in Texas, and pushed through a vote for emergency flood control. 3 days later, I pulled into my driveway and heard it. The hiss and growl of diesel engines where the water should have been singing. I walked down the slope and my stomach dropped. Wildcat Creek was gone. In its place was a straight, ugly concrete channel about 2 feet deep. My dad's spillways, gone. The moss-covered rocks, the trout beds, the natural bends that slowed. Water, gone. All replaced by flat, lifeless gray. It looked like a drainage ditch behind a shopping mall. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I took photos. I measured the flow. I took water samples. And then I started digging into the company that did the work, Piedmont Construction. Turns out they had 2 open EPA violation cases and no record of a permit for this project. And under both Georgia law and the Federal Clean Water Act, altering a natural waterway without permits can mean $30,000 a day in fines. So I filed reports. State Environmental Agency, County Code Enforcement, EPA Regional Office, and then I called the president of the North Georgia Fly Fishing Association. He nearly shouted on the phone. They'd been trying for years to protect Wildcat Creek's trout habitat. Valerie had just destroyed one of the best spawning sections in the region. Within 2 weeks, there were 3 separate investigations. Open. And while I was playing my long game, Valerie escalated. She offered me $300,000 to sign over my water rights and leave the county. I told her no. She smiled, that kind of smile that hides teeth, and said she'd make sure my life here became unworkable. That's when the harassment began. My mailbox got smashed twice, my truck tires slashed. Someone left a bag of dead fish on my porch. My daughter's small baking business, which she ran online, started getting fake negative reviews from accounts traced back to HOA members. I documented everything. Dates, times, photos, security camera footage. One clip showed Valerie's Range Rover idling at the end of my driveway at 1:43 a.m., and while she thought she was grinding me down, I was building something she couldn't stop. A paper trail that pointed to not just environmental destruction, but financial fraud. See, the HOA charged each homeowner $2,000 for that emergency flood control project, $120,000 total. But according to Piedmont Construction's own invoices, the work cost less than $45,000. The rest? Routed through 2 consulting firms, both registered under Valerie's brother's name. It was theft wrapped in concrete, and then came the twist she never saw coming. My dad's old engineering notebooks, the ones I'd kept in the attic, had a study he'd done for the county back in 1978. It warned against exactly the kind of straight channeling Valerie had just installed. The data showed it would triple downstream flood risk during heavy spring rains. That report had been archived with the county, meaning Valerie couldn't claim she didn't know. The snowmelt that year was record high. The storms came in mid-April. And just like my dad had calculated 45 years ago, the concrete channel turned Wildcat Creek into a fast-moving water cannon aimed straight at the foundations of Magnolia Hills. By the time the rain stopped, 6 basements were flooded, 2 retaining walls had collapsed, and the walking trail was under 2 feet of water. My land, bone dry. The lawsuits started flying. Not at me, but at the HOA board. Insurance companies were pointing at the unpermitted work, the missing funds, the ignored engineering warnings. The EPA was piling on with federal fines. The state environmental agency ordered them to remove the concrete and restore the creek, at HOA expense, and I didn't have to raise my voice once. You want the smartest revenge? Sometimes it's patience, sometimes it's paperwork, and sometimes it's just letting physics do the talking. But here's the thing. These kinds of fights happen everywhere. Maybe it's not water rights for you. Maybe it's a neighbor, a board, a boss who thinks their power is bigger than the rules. The trick is to know the rules better than they do, and have the patience to watch them trip over their own arrogance. So my question for you, if someone tried to take something irreplaceable from you, would you fight them head on, or would you quietly set the stage so that when they fall, they can only blame themselves?